Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. What's happening, guys?
It's great to see you here, and I want to say thank you so much to Spartano Negative. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Spartano in the house, as is Ewok from Endor, as is Nuke, and Calvin, and Jeff as well, Ray Ray the Cow. We got the family here. We got Kimberly.
Hi, Kimberly. Hi, you guys. It's great to see you. Great to see everybody here. Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, and Ewok from Endor. I like that. That's cute.
Chris Marr, what's happening, guys? Yeah, we're going to go over, it's been a while since we really talked about safe zones, and there's so much that's happened, in the last 6 months. Obviously, there's a lot of things to include when you're talking about safe zones. Well, what is a safe zone? Well, there's certain areas that are thought to be more livable for what's coming and what is already happening. There's so much to take into consideration when you really, really look at it. And things change too. I think if we were talking about safe zones maybe last year, we might have different things in mind from this year, because obviously we're facing a pestilence, and it looks like there might be more pestilences lined up to come pretty soon after. And we're also facing civil unrest. When we were talking before about it, I think so many people were just thinking earth changes, we're thinking big earthquakes, we're thinking potential for tsunami, we're thinking a lot of those things, like what about if we do have a pole reversal that leads to crustal displacement, and it's a Chan Thomas scenario with 1 or 2 mile high waves, then you're really, really limited in your safe places. What are we really going to face here in the coming years? And, where is really safe?
Yeah, we have a lot going on. We have a lot of things changing rapidly. And, then again, what's your perception of safe too? Everybody has a different idea of what they need.
So Ewok wants to know when you're going to connect with the other dimension next.
I don't know. We might try tomorrow. Today's been pretty busy.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's going on right now is the need for energy work and the like. So, we saw I think around 7 people today already for energy work. And we have been really, really busy, and we're thankful to be able to help so many people because it's a blessing. That's one of the things, when you help others, it really does bless you. It really, really does.
It's a beautiful thing. There's no better way of getting out of your own head than kind of reaching out to help somebody else. That usually yanks you right out of your bad spot if you are in a bad spot.
Kenny Crowder in the house, Knowledge 2020 as well. And we got Awakened and Aware. Hey, we got Kim Rizzo. Good to see you, sister. Energies 1111. Much love as always. Truth Co-op Diana was saying too that she was thinking about this very subject today. Because I do think as we move along, it's like you get hit with one thing and maybe it makes you all of a sudden think differently. Like, maybe this isn't the greatest spot to be. Maybe I should have thought about a different spot. And, maybe there should be a backup spot that is not even remotely close to where this spot that you find yourself at is. And of course, everybody's got different limitations, things they're dealing with. We saw figures now that say that the unemployment rate is like 42 to 46% when you get down to it. So obviously, people are crunched for money on the whole. So that's going to also make things tougher in some ways. But in other ways too, you have people now kind of looking at things like, well, if my life is in danger, screw the mortgage, screw this area, I'm just getting out of here.
Right.
Because we've seen so much chaos going on. So there's a lot of variables to put into this type of research. Good to see you, Dave Lewis, brother. We love you. Jay Thomas, Patricia.
Gosh, I mean, the house is filling up. This is really, really wonderful. Really great to see you guys. Yeah, I mean, so many questions, and that's, like everybody has to ask themselves this. So we have a little bit of guidance to go with, and that's what we're going to go over today.
And, I've gone back and forth in my mind, in my left brain many times, thinking about different priorities. And, then again, I've had visions that have kind of shown me where I was supposed to go, or the area thereabouts. And then, reality sets in too, and you have all sorts of things that you're faced with. Well, what do I do about family? What do I do about, your work, or all sorts of different things to really look at and put together.
Yeah, I mean, there's things to consider. There's a lot to consider out there. And, we have the information we have to give us guidance, and hopefully that'll give us all some guidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, while we still have some time left to prep, and, I feel, and I've shared with you guys, I really feel that from now until November is kind of like, it's like the window's closing, because I do expect there's going to be chaos in November. And you don't have to be psychic or super intuitive to figure that out. We can see what's building with the possibility of election issues, fraud, or, if there is going to be an election even, how do we even, we don't even know that there will be an election. But you could look at the signs, you could look at things that are being said by both sides, and they're already laying out the suspicions with each other, so you could expect there's probably going to be election chaos. I would lay money on. I wonder if Nuclea's gone and look at Vegas odds. Is there any Vegas odds on election chaos? Yeah, I wonder if people are betting on things like, will there be an election? Will the election be contested? Will the other side accept the election results?
I know, what's going on there. And pool bets are always fun, and I imagine they're fun to look for too. I bet you there's some out there.
Hey there, Velvet Fry. Good to see you as well. Deuce in the house too. Yeah, wherever you are is always a perfect place to be. It's all the mindset. It is a mindset, I'll agree. But then at the same time, if you were in, Chaz, downtown Seattle, all of a sudden, it was blissful, and then you find yourself in the middle of chaos. How about, Minneapolis? Same thing. Maybe you were living in one of those areas that has seen tremendous riots, and you loved where you lived, and then all of a sudden, things are getting smashed, people are getting dragged out of the cars, and things are getting burnt down, for instance. Or say if you're in in Wisconsin with some of the floods that we've had, so many of the other areas where we've seen tremendous floods going on, it's blissful until that type of thing hits you. So there again, it is about consciousness. It's about raising our consciousness and going through the ascension process, which is really quickening. We are, as we said, we worked with 7 people today, energy wise, and people are rapidly progressing in this ascension, and that's really a wonderful thing. And so I think we are getting more intuitive, we are increasing in our abilities, and that's beautiful, and that's all of what's supposed to be happening. A lot of other things obviously are constructed to take our attention away from that and to lower our vibrations into one of fear.
Yeah, to try to lock us into a mode of fear so that they can create that reality that we superimpose it upon ourselves, and then they take stuff and they lock us into that reality, and we just can't let that happen. We absolutely cannot let that happen, because we have choices. We have choices to rise up and above this. And the way we treat ourselves and talk to ourselves and other people, really, that really, really matters.
And again, as Truth Co-op says, that you could feel the energy building. That's exactly what Cindy was saying. It feels like it's a little bit of a lull at this moment, but it feels like things are building. And I do, before we get into the safe zone thing, I do also think that the higher, darker powers are starting to show themselves a little bit more. It really is a spiritual battle, as we've been saying.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on, and you can feel the energy just sort of it's growing, it's rising, and it feels like it's going to reach this max, and then there's going to be this big pop. And it's, something is either going to be all over or just starting, but it's going to be big.
Yeah, and interesting comments there too. Lots of interesting comments. Good to see everybody. So, yeah, it is. It's like we're watching one of these horror movies that go up on Netflix that seem to predict exactly what's coming next, right? So, when we look at all these Earth changes maps, a lot of them have very, very similar info. And I really think a lot of this is still coming from Casey. You have maps. This one's by Stan Deo. And you could see the East Coast here. Eventually, this is supposed to all be underwater. We had Casey's predictions about the Gulf and the Great Lakes connecting. And then the West Coast is not going to fare well by most maps if we look at that. But there are safe zones, and we have the Hopi prophecies as well. There's so much to take into consideration. Now, one thing I want to talk about is the nuclear situation. And, we have Chernobyl, which was a major, major disaster. And, the models say that there might have been as many as 16,000 fatalities from this when you get down to it over time. Lots of deformities, lots of people getting sick and ill. We had Fukushima, which is an atrocity, just an absolute atrocity. And, I personally am against nuclear power. I don't think we really need it. And when we have patents out there for technologies that would do away with all this stuff, and there's patents, for anti-gravity tech, we could have free energy. It's all about keeping us in this same system of control and consolidation of power, as we know. But when you look at these two incidents, it makes you really, really cautious if you're around a nuclear power plant. So that's something to keep in mind. And so, this one nuclear power plant, Southern Washington State, shut down 23 times because of emergency shutdowns. Scary stuff. So if something happens to go wrong at a nuclear reactor, anyone living in a 10-mile radius of the plant may have to evacuate. And then you also may have to evacuate even at 50 miles. 50 miles is what they say. The U.S. government recommends Americans, stay 50 miles away in case of disaster. Now, winds can also pose a problem. And so know which way the prevailing winds are. Like where we are usually located, the winds come from one spot, and then the next hour they'll come from another spot, and then like another hour they'll come from another spot. Thankfully, we're not near any nuclear reactors. I'll have all these links here for you, too, because there's some PDFs here, too. This one's about minimizing harm and security risk of nuclear energy, and we're going to touch on that one. This is surviving a catastrophic power outage, which, again, I just got this feeling like we might see something like this again come towards the end of the year, and I've been feeling this all year, that we're going to start to see some of the grid failures and the blackouts. And then, of course, we got the looming prospect of war building. We know India and China, their issues, they're still building up right on either side of the line over there. That could set off at any time. There's a million different places that could start up, with the war situation. And then over here you see the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force. This was a report from 2018. And then there's an older one too. There's a report on the Commission to assess the threat to the U.S. from EMPs. Very, very real. And the likelihood is, if there really, really was a WW3, an EMP would be one of the first things that would happen. And you might not know what happened, or what really happened. We might be wondering, wow, was it a CME? I didn't see that coming. Was it a coronal mass ejection? Where'd the power go? One of the things is when the power goes out, and then you check your phone and see what happened. I mean, if the phone's working, okay. We're okay. Could breathe a little easy. But if the phone's not working, you go to turn the car over and the car won't start, then you know that we're in a really serious situation.
Again, a lot of things can happen, like emotionally too. Like, really, that's to me, that's the number one thing to be concerned with is your emotions. Like, if we do have an EMP or something like that, and you look at your phone is dead, you can't start your car. Imagine the emotional impact or the emotional wallop you're gonna feel in your chest when you realize, holy moly, something actually happened. And that's gonna send out, I think, a shockwave out to the universe of sorts.
Yeah, and I do expect, honestly, that would be probably the first thing that China would do is send an EMP. An EMP, a nuclear blast, high over the Dakotas, would take out the power to the entire U.S., a big chunk of Canada, and also Mexico. And that's the likely scenario. And if you guys remember, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. My dear friend, Asia, that's what she had seen coming. And she channels Archangel Michael. And she had seen that scenario playing out. And gosh, if I remember right, I think she had timed that for September of this year. I'm going to have to reach out to her again, touch base. I haven't talked to her in a few months. But that is what she saw happen. And let's hope not. And again, we can, if we wake up enough people and get everybody awake, we can affect change. So that is definitely one of our main things to do, is to wake people up to this. It recently was in the news about China and EMPs, just recently. And a lot of times, again, things get leaked to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they need to leak things. I know when we were looking for the for that outage thing for, what was it, Homeland Security, the initial first few times we tried looking for it, it had disappeared. And I thought, well, I guess they just have to put the truth out there once. It doesn't mean they have to keep telling us. But then we have this stuff.
And this is from 5 days ago. 5 days ago, guys. So China has first strike capability to melt U.S. power grid with an EMP. And, I feel strongly that, my guides have been whispering in my ear that you need to do this video. I did a video like this in, I think I did one in 2017, one 2018. So it's been a little bit. But I feel strongly it's time to talk about all this stuff again, just so people could really think things through. We just got in today 2 cases that are EMP proof that you could put stuff in, and Faraday cages. There's ways to kind of protect yourself. Recognize, and again, not everybody might know the basics of this, but the only cars that would work if we had an EMP would be those that don't have anything computerized. So we're talking like if you got an old 1970 Chevy pickup out there, it might turn over and be fine. If you have a carbureted motorcycle or something like that, a quad maybe, again, no computer chips, they might be fine. You might be okay. Your horse is going to be fine to ride. But your car, your brand new 2020 Chevy pickup or whatever it is, that's not going to work. It'll be fried in case of this. So China has built up a network of satellites, high-speed missiles, super electromagnetic pulse weapons that can melt down our grid, fry critical communications, and even take out the ability of aircraft carrier groups to respond. Not only that, Let me just pull this up and hand this to Cindy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a plethora of stuff to consider. It's really hard to sit down and, kind of prioritize one thing over the other. So I think the best thing to do is just go over all the information, and then you guys prioritize what's better for you.
So one of the other things to realize, if we look at this, and I recognize that we have people in Australia and the UK and many other places across the globe, just focusing in on the US. Do you see all those planes in the air? Well, if we had an EMP, they would be coming down. Mm-hmm. Look at that. Look at this. Look at all these planes in the air. All these planes would be dropping out of the sky if there was an EMP detonation, or at least a lot of these would. A big portion of these would. It depends on where they detonate it. But I mean, that is something that is super, super sobering to think about. There's so much to take in consideration, when you're talking about safe zones. Obviously, one of the things is, we already have a chaotic situation going on. We've talked about how it is tougher in the cities, most definitely, for many reasons. Just the chaos, the anarchy, roving gangs that will develop. I mean, not necessarily gangs that are gangs right now, but just when you get these predators out there that will start to band together with other predators, and basically victimize people that are not predators. It's going to be tougher in the cities.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to consider, and then there's a lot of people who need medicine and a lot of people who may need a doctor. So there is a lot of stuff to look at, consider, but we have time. We have this time to use to plan and make our situation safe, because our surroundings are manipulatable. If I could say that, I can't even say it. Our surroundings can be manipulated to an extent. So I think now is the time to start working on that and looking at that.
We did have the big statement that Americans need to start prepping for up to 6 months without electricity, and that came out in December 2018. And so, again, this was from Department of Homeland Security, so we should take it serious. It is something that's real. And we most definitely see the rhetoric going on between China and the U.S. So, again, the other thing to take into consideration, besides the planes coming out, falling out of the sky and all, and the fact that our cars won't work, most of them won't, is the nuclear reactors themselves. Because how about the nuclear reactors themselves? Now, they're built to have redundancy in them, and they do have backup generators, but what about, when you can't supply the fuel to the backup generator? What's going to happen? Do we end up with meltdown situations? This is something to keep in mind, and this is the location of U.S. nuclear power plants. So if you guys have been following me for a while, I was in North Carolina, which I still love the Appalachians, and it is a survivable zone. I think you're going to have a lot of people, obviously because of the population over there, you'll have a ton of people clamoring into the same area. So even though it's relatively sparsely populated, it wouldn't be over time if things were going to chaos. And you're having people leaving cities like Atlanta and Charlotte and all of them heading up into the mountains. It'll get pretty packed pretty quick. But it is, thought to be one of the safer zones that could escape through these times. But at the same time, you do have some power plants. Most definitely through Virginia. You can see a whole bunch over here going into D.C., going into eastern Pennsylvania. New York has a few. There's one up by Boston. New York State does as well. And then we see all these down through Illinois. There's a ton around Illinois now. Prevailing winds coming usually from the west. So even though, over here, these are all in Illinois, it's still probably going to end up causing something that people in Indiana would have to be concerned about as well. And you see Missouri has one right here, Kansas here, Nebraska, and New Madrid is another area to keep aware. There's a lot of things to look at. Earthquakes, most definitely, tsunami potential. And that's another thing. The storms are getting stronger. The hurricanes are getting stronger. We've seen massive flooding. We saw that hurricane that came in and just went 1 to 2 miles an hour, which we'd never seen before, just inundating the Carolinas with water. And we also saw bizarre behavior from Harvey, right? And that was crazy because the way these storms are operating, and you and I know it, that there's a lot of steering potential, as well as there's weather wars that are underway, I believe, as well. There's so much to take in. But again, nuclear power plants are a big thing, and most of them are on the eastern side of the country. So that's something to be aware of. You could look for little pocket safe zones, like over here, eastern Oklahoma. There's none right there. You have some north, some south. New Mexico doesn't have any, but it does have a nuclear facility there, more of a military nature, Los Alamos. So, be aware of things like that as well. And the West doesn't have too many nuclear power plants, but when we look at the Earth change maps, Nevada doesn't really exist in hardly any of them from the Earth changes. Same thing with Western Utah. And so there's a lot of things to take in consideration. And nuclear power plants are definitely one of the things we should be aware of.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Because we just don't know what's going to happen and what's going to happen for how long. And Duce says, Mike and Cindy, don't you see the EMP thing as a very plausible false flag power grab and excuse for martial law, not to discount nature itself, of course, right? Yeah, I do. I mean, I see that there's many, many, many possibilities that they could use it for. And I know somebody also mentioned that the military probably has backup for an EMP, which is really good, but that's for the military. I just don't think that they're really going to extend out too many helping hands. And even if they do, I don't want to be in the position to really need their help. So there is a lot to consider. And again, it all depends on where are you at personally? What are your personal needs? What can you tolerate? Can you handle the truly, truly cold weather? Can you handle the really, really, really hot weather? Some people can just deal with it, no problem. Other people are hypersensitive.
And you were talking about that. So, one of the things is too, if you look at Russia, they have a lot of places for their civilians to come in, go underground, and be bunkered out. The U.S. doesn't. It doesn't have anything for us. It has no, public shelters in case of something like this. And Russia does, which has always been a big disconcerting thing to me. It's like, that almost makes you feel like Russia cares more about their citizens than the U.S. does. Because they have built shelters for the average person and the public to go shelter in case of that. And the U.S. has nothing for you and me. They do for the elites. They have, of course, tons of deep underground military bases and bunkers that government can go and be sheltered. And unfortunately, nothing for the civilians, which is always, it's just, question marks, all over the place. So here is something else to look at too. So when we're looking at this map right here is showing earthquake risks. And so you might not be aware. I mean, if you're in Charleston, South Carolina, one of my favorite places in the country, it's at high risk of earthquakes. So you see here the red is the highest, and then orange, then yellow, and then it goes down from there into the green and more of that light blue down into the sandy colors where there's very little risk. So these are zones. Obviously, New Madrid's a big one. Oklahoma, because of all the fracking, has not the highest risk, but it's at more risk than it would be if we didn't have the fracking, obviously. And then, of course, California and all up through the Cascadia as well. And then we have the risk over by Yellowstone. So the other thing to look at is the fault lines, right? And so the fault lines are in red. And as you can see, there's not a lot really over in the east. But when we go over into the west, let's just take a look at the fault lines off the coast in Cascadia. Look at all that. So this area is under tremendous pressure too. It's a subduction zone, one plate going under the other. As you see, like this earthquake risk is super high there. And as we look into the states, and by the way, we had a 5.0 west of Tonopah, which stuck out. You can still see the swarming going on here. Look at all these faults. They're all over the place. All over the place. Tons of faults. So the west is pretty riddled in them. And obviously, California is a prime at-risk area for earthquakes, as we know, but the entire west is as well. So when you look over into here, and this is our Four Corners area, and it gets us thinking about the Hopi, that's better, definitely better. You do have some in Colorado as well as Wyoming, and of course, if Yellowstone went, it's kind of like game over for the Northern Hemisphere. We're all going to be heading to New Zealand and Australia if we can, or Africa or South America. And as far as Colorado with Denver, because Denver, all the things we've heard, Denver would be the new capital if anything happened to D.C. Most definitely there's a lot of military bases underneath the ground over there, and we all know about the Denver airport. We do see more and more quake activity over towards El Paso and western Texas, but again, tons of fracking going on. There's so much fracking going on in southern Colorado too. It's horrible, all the fracking, and northern New Mexico as well. So this is another thing to take into consideration. There's a lot of things to look at.
Yep. there's a lot going on, and I feel blessed because we still have some time to kind of poke around, nose around, and figure out what we're going to do. And other people have time too. And I know when we reported on other things, a lot of people were saying that we were just fear-mongering, but turns out those other things we reported on were really good and were really helpful for people, because otherwise they would have run out of supplies. So and I feel we're in that same position right now where we can kind of mention this, and so people can, do what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I got this strong message to stock up on rice and beans and all that type of stuff way before everything else hit. And we did, and I'm glad we did, so right now we're in a position where we don't have to be scrambling to stock up on those things right now. And, the costs are going to keep going up too. That's the next thing that's going to be coming. And I don't think there's any doubt about this is that we're going to have hyperinflation, especially when you're talking about food, basic things like that. It's exactly what the Bible says when it's talking about exotic luxuries, being cheap, and yet basics like a loaf of bread, some eggs, whatever, is going to be super expensive. Like work 3 days for a dozen eggs, basically. I mean, that's the direction that this is heading in right now. So we should be, again, preparing ourselves to grow as much as we can, produce as much food as we can for ourselves and for our families.
Right. Now's the time. And also, having that emotional preparedness, because what I feel, with the collective is going to have the biggest struggle with is that slug in your gut of energy when you do realize, okay, this is it. This is what we've been planning for. This is what we've been waiting for. And now it's here. And I just sense this shockwave going off throughout, and that's going to have a big impact on the planet. And I feel like that's the domino that's going to start everything falling.
Yeah, I mean, great comments. So Start with Ray right here. Their lawnmowers are goats. Just saying, no, that's great, because then the goats could give you milk. And if you're a meat eater, meat eventually too, if you had to. And Brother Asadusaman says food terrorism is coming. It is already here. Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, just look at what's going on with the pandemic. You know what I mean? It's obvious. It's just obvious what's going on. It's all these things, political as well as the earth changes. It's all adding up to a perfect storm of food chaos and famine that will be coming. And again, we have to just think longer term too, because we might have enough food stashed away for 6 months or a year, but think long term as well. And, again, yeah, it's true. They are shutting down the meat production. That is obvious as well. And I hate all these slaughtering of the animals that they seem to do. Why? Why are they, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. I just don't buy it. I really don't buy it.
Unless it's some weird, like... the slaughtering of the animals is more and more sacrifice and stuff like that. It makes me sad to mention that, but I have a feeling that, they'll stop at nothing to get the energy that they need to feed on.
Most definitely. And as we've been saying before, the message that's coming through loud and clear is don't get pulled into the violence, don't get pulled into the chaos and the drama. I mean, that's not to say, I've seen videos where people have been, just dragged out of their car, beaten, and then their car stolen. And we saw a video today where protesters were slowing down a car, and then the guy he didn't run anybody over, but he just made sure he kept going because he knew he might get pulled out, or he or she. And then somebody in the crowd pulled out a gun and started shooting at him. That's just chaos. It's just unfathomable. And so, do we have a right to defend our family if somebody, a group, a gang is going to do? Of course. And everybody should be prepared along those lines as well. I would never want to hurt anybody, but at the same time, I wouldn't, let something like that happen to my family. You would have to do what you would have to do in the face of that type of evil. And the other thing to take into consideration is really the number one thing people have lost their lives to has been flooding. That's the number one thing as far as life loss and really crop loss as well. So, this was the 2020 spring flood outlook. So you could see again, major is this purplish color. These are the areas with the most problem, and then red, and then minor with the yellow. And then again, just take into consideration that as we get deeper into the cycle, more cloud nucleation, more volcanoes going off. And then add to the fact that they're just telling us right out that there is 3 times the amount of water locked up in the crust and in the mantle than there is in the oceans. And in these cycles, you got to wonder, does some of that water get squeezed out into the oceans, into the atmosphere, and again, bring us back to the days of Noah once again? So be aware of the flooding potential as well. And again, the water is how most people have died, more than any other disasters, more than quakes. So flooding. We've seen so many cars get swept away. We've seen so many people trying to, make it through a puddle, and then they're gone, and they find them later on somewhere, down the line. And the other side we have is drought. And, they're telling us that we have a mega catastrophic drought building in the West. So, these are areas that are under severe drought as well. So, that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, many people might have wells, and you might figure, well, I got a well, I'm good. I'm not dependent on the city or what have you. But is it operated by an electric pump? Because if we do have an EMP, a CME, if the grid goes down, whatever it is, if there's even just a major storm that somehow wipes things out and you have no power for a long time, will you be able to get that water up? So things like a hand pump backup.
Yeah, hand pump backup. So solar. There's a lot to really consider. And none of us are going to think of it all at once. That's why I like this collective effort to chat with you guys and have people pass information back and forth in the chat, to bring about other ideas or other things to think about for your own personal situation. It's definitely going to be, it's definitely on its way. The energy that I feel rising is a very emotional energy. And then it feels like something physical is going to pop. And that's going to create that big slug in the gut feeling. And something tells me that they're going to feed off of that energy too. So when you do realize that something has happened and it's go time, try to maintain yourself. Don't freak out. Don't lose it. Just understand, okay, it's go time. I was trained for this. I've been preparing my whole life for this. And now we're going to take care of business, because actually that's your job. That's your mission.
Yeah, so this is just yet one other thing to take into consideration. There's one of the channels that we enjoy is the Green Dream Project, and they're just a really nice couple, a local couple down in Arizona, down in Cochise County, which in my opinion is one of the safest zones, one of the better choices, but everybody has a different opinion. Now, they're able to collect rainwater. They get about 13, 14 inches, mostly coming in with the monsoons. So they have a ton of capacity. They just built a cistern with sandbags that's 14,000 gallons. And then they have several other containers too. And so they were showing that, what did they get? It was they had a rainfall of 1/3 of an inch, and they got, I forget how many gallons they got, but maybe like over 1,000 gallons just from catching it. So think about things like that if it's feasible in your area, rain catchment as well. Now, it's crazy, but in some areas it's actually against the law, and that's again, same thing with being tied into the grid. There's some areas where you can't be off grid. It's against the law. Now that's totally Big Brother. That is so ridiculous. It's all about just being in the system, and we need to get ourselves out of the system. So this one was by Dr. Chet B. Snow. And so this predictions were to take place 1998 to 2012. Well, a lot of the Earth changes predictions are running late. A lot of people thought they were going to happen before 2000, maybe like 1980s to 2000, or a little after 2000, maybe even 2012. And then thought, well, it's not going to happen. But now it looks like they are happening. I don't think there's a lot of people that would doubt, at least, in our circles, that would doubt that we are definitely in the Earth changes that were spoken of. It's just that they are running late. So maybe it was our consciousness that pushed them back. Maybe our intentions pushed them back. Although I do know it's difficult to get time when you're in that timeless realm, and a lot of times that could be the toughest thing. So again, what do we see? We see, this is a little bit more than Casey said. As you see, even Dallas is underwater here, according to this one. But you have a little island over here in the Ozarks. And of course, you do have the Great Lakes and Gulf of Mexico as one body. And you got a big new Atlantis over here. California is just a strip and some islands. And, most of Nevada is gone, as again, same thing with the western part of Utah. And this one was Gordon Michael Scallions. And let's go bigger first here. You can see he shows about the same thing with Atlantis popping up here. He's got Lemuria in 2 different spots over here, which we know there's a lot of volcanic activity going on off the coast of Oregon, Northern California, Washington. And perhaps there will be some land popping up over there. And again, we see there's no Nevada. There's really hardly any Utah left, and a big chunk of Colorado is gone as well. Western Arizona is gone. California's just some islands. And again, you have the Gulf and the Great Lakes merging as one body of water. And we have a lot of areas in the east, too, that ends up underwater. And you can see this massive landmass over here that rises, as well as some off of South America. So pretty extreme. And then if you look at Europe over here, Casey said Northern Europe would be changed in a twinkling of an eye. Yeah, there's just a few islands. If we look through Scandinavia, it's just a few little islands left. UK not looking too good. Same thing with Ireland, maybe about a quarter of its size. Not much left of France anymore, or Germany. Poland's totally gone. Ukraine's almost all gone. Romania's totally gone. Hungary's gone. Yugoslavia's gone. Bulgaria's gone. Down through Greece, all gone. And Africa is basically a bunch of islands too, for the most part. Rapid, complete change there. And, Bangladesh, there's a big chunk of that gone as well. This would be a completely different world, to say the least. This one's curious because, look at this one. It has China and Russia occupation, the years 2022 to 2024. Now, this is again off, although we are seeing the start of it, 2016, 2017, these two coming together. Yellow is the Chinese occupation, red is the Russian occupation. And the other thing that hit me is looking at this, because they must have been paying attention to Walker Lane, and they have the water coming in through here. Interesting stuff. Will we see that? Time will tell, guys.
Yeah, time is definitely going to tell. Sometimes when you come up with this information, the frequencies you're picking up at that time are the most possible scenarios, but as time goes on, things alter and they change. So then, that might not be the most likely outcome. Something else might come up, but there's a whole lot of different scenarios to take into consideration, a whole lot of different things to take note of and, add to whatever you're planning for. There's just a lot here. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely can be. And if we go over here, this is another one. And here, a common theme is that you see the Mississippi River getting much, much bigger. We see a lot of the West underwater as well. And then some other areas in the East underwater. And this is another handwritten one. You see, again, the West underwater. Same thing with the Mississippi getting bigger, almost a sea. And this is another. There's a lot of commonality. And this one has U.S. commercial power reactors on it. And it's the U.S. Navy map, which a lot of people have talked about. So most of them are kind of in agreement. So when we look at Casey's actual predictions, they are pretty, they ring in my mind all the time. So as to the changes, physical again, the Earth will be broken up in the western portion of America. The greater portion of Japan must go into the sea. The upper portion of Europe will be changed as in a twinkling of an eye. Land will appear off the east coast of America. There will be upheavals in the Arctic and in the Antarctic that will make for the eruption of volcanoes in the torrid areas. And there will be a shifting then of the poles, so that where there have been those of a frigid or semi-tropical will become more tropical, and moss and fern will grow. And these will begin in those periods. Now, he said those were going to begin in 58 to 98. So, that's quite a bit off. because it's really just starting now from what we're seeing. I mean, there are some things that have been underway, but when these will be proclaimed as the periods when his light will again be seen in the clouds, as to the times, as to seasons, as to places, alone is given to those who have named the name and those who bear the mark of those of his calling and his election in their bodies. To them it shall be given. As to the conditions in the geography of the world, of the country changes here, are the gradually coming about. No wonder then that the entity feels the need, the necessity for change of a central location. For many portions of the East Coast will be disturbed, as well as many portions of the West Coast, as well as the central portion of the U.S. In the next few years, land will appear in the Atlantic, as well as in the Pacific. And what is the coastline of now many a land will be the bed of an ocean. Even many battlefields of the present will be ocean, will be the seas, the bays, and the lands over which the new order will carry on their trade as one with the other. Portions of now east coast of New York, or New York City itself, will in the main disappear. This will be another generation, though, here. While the southern portions of Carolina, Georgia, these will disappear. This will be much sooner. The waters of the lakes, the Great Lakes, will empty into the Gulf, rather than the waterway over which such discussions have been recently made. It would be well if the waterway were prepared, but not for that purpose for which it is at present being considered. Then the area where the entity is now located, Virginia Beach, will be among the safe lands, as will portions of what is now Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and much of the southern portion of Canada and the eastern portion of Canada, while the western land, much of that is to be disturbed in this land, as of course in other lands. So there again, some of the safe zones that he is talking about. And when we look over to the Hopi prophecy, then we see them saying that World War III would be started by people who first received the light. China, Palestine, India, and Africa. And it's interesting because right there we have China and India facing off, about ready to start World War III. And, of course, Palestine, Israel, that's always been a point of contention. And then Africa, because China is doing a good job at securing African resources. They have been, and China and the U.S. and Europe have been trying to secure those resources. Same thing also with South and Central America. So when the war comes, the United States will be destroyed by gourds of ashes, which will fall to the ground, boiling the rivers and burning the earth, where no grass will grow for many years, causing a disease that no medicine can cure. This can only mean nuclear or atomic bombs, but we also see that we have bizarre things going on in regards to disease right now for sure as well. And then it talks about Blue Star Kachina removing its mask, and the time of great trial will be here. The Hopi believe that only they will be saved. You can see that there's the idea of a remnant in all traditions. And so, the Hopi are looking for their salvation as they were saved from the last cataclysm by the Ant Friends, the Anunnaki. Interestingly enough, that brought them into the inner earth so they could escape, and then they came up in the Four Corners area, and the Four Corners is supposed to be spared. And then it gets into the planet and pole shift, what seems like pole shift, crustal displacement, and massive cataclysm. It's interesting to see all these things. Prophecy comes from everywhere you look, really. Everybody has their prophecies, their own prophecies, and what's fascinating is so many of them go together so well. Most of them kind of really do fit together like puzzle pieces.
Well, the thing is, when you're dealing with time, there is no time when the information comes to you psychically. That's very difficult because things happen in a series of events, not according to a calendar. So it's really difficult, to try to give a timeline. But it's different to give a series of events and in which order. So to me, that's what we look for. We look for these events that are occurring and are taking place and leading up to some kind of a pinnacle of information that we can watch for. And it feels like every day, and every day I'm like, wow, can it get much bigger? And then it does. So, it's like, yeah, there's definitely a lot going on.
And then with all the chaos, look at population density, and this is a population density map. So obviously it's going to be more challenging in many ways in areas where there's very dense populations competing for what's left over of dwindling resources. It would be wonderful if the world could just cooperate and get along and work together to overcome the challenges. But as we see, we're always kind of baited into these things like the race wars and stuff like that are trying to be fomented, to use a term that was used by A. Pike, fomenting 3 world wars by the agents of the provocateur, as that word that begins with an I, ends with an I. We've talked about that, a couple of L's, U and M. Yeah, we're not going to say it. But so, again, you don't really want to be in a population dense area for the most part. Also, just think about this. Even if you are, the greatest fisherman and hunter in the world, when all of a sudden, you might find yourself in 1 square mile with another, 2,000 of the greatest hunters in the world out there, it makes for accidents, to say the least. So, you got to think about that. So I think, less population is a good thing in most cases. And, of course, then you might think of Canada, but then you have to throw in the whole grand solar minimum thing. How cold is it going to get? Because, as more volcanoes go off, it's going to end up getting colder and colder. And if you guys have been paying attention to some of the videos we've done recently, we were talking about different situations when you had major eruptions and then you have huge famines thereafter. And the eruptions are coming. So again, you have to take that into consideration. Escaping up into the woods of Canada or Alaska, if you could survive the cold, it could be an option. And we, again, being maybe off the coasts, because if you're right on the coastline and there is really a shifting of the crust, that will cause tsunamis. And so, or even if you say we're right on the coast up in Washington and Oregon, when the Great Quake of 1700 hit, it devastated Indian villages all along the coast, and they, remember that. So you have to think about that as well. A lot of things to take in consideration. Altitude, a lot of people will look at altitude right away as well. Because if we did have a shifting of the crust and, all of Florida, the highest points in Florida are maybe 120 feet or something like that above sea level, more than likely all that would be inundated. If there wasn't that type of event, obviously you would still have hurricanes to contend with and a lot of flooding in Florida, albeit you could grow stuff year round and there's plenty of rain. Everywhere has a challenge. The 3 areas that people look at the most for people that have studied this, as far as this country, would be the Appalachian Mountains in the east, the Ozarks, and then over towards the Four Corners area as being the best options, or potentially the most survivable options. What we're seeing right now, and we still see a lot of earthquakes swarming. And let me just switch this out so we're not looking at these anymore. We still see quite a bit of swarming over here. We've been watching the swarming. It's calming down now to a degree. We've had China Lake and everything, Ridgecrest area. And as I've shared with you guys, this was Long Valley Caldera is a super volcano, and it not as strong as Yellowstone, but could it ruin, if it went off again, would it make things kind of unbearable in our country, the U.S., and over in Europe as well. Yeah, it definitely would. An eruption like that would be devastating. So, and I got to wonder if this is where the plume is now because of the way the plate moves. And we've talked about that before, because like Yellowstone was over in Oregon, and it's just been moving this way because the plate's moving that way. So the plume stays the same. It's in the same spot, and the plume is where the magma's coming up from the core. The plate's in motion, so the plate's moving. So that's why, Yellowstone is where it is now, and it's still moving over to the east. So, hopefully Yellowstone won't go. Hopefully Long Valley won't go. Hopefully we won't have any of those major eruptions in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime. But if we did, then, that would be devastating to the planet. The thing is that the magnetosphere being in decline, and we do know we are definitely in a magnetic pole reversal. The last several times, it didn't do a full reversal. It was basically an excursion. Excursion is when it starts out to be a reversal, but then jumps back into place. So it's way overdue. And unfortunately, there's quite a few things that are way overdue that can big time impact us. And one of the things that Casey brought up too, which was interesting, and he really totally got right, is that he talked about the South Atlantic anomaly. And he said that the beginnings of the pole reversal were going to start right over in here between South America and Africa. And that area has been growing consistently, and that's the South Atlantic anomaly. So he was totally on with that. He had that pegged. And he said that was the beginning of the pole reversal. And so he did see what Hapgood and Velikovsky saw, that it's not going to just be the fact that we're going to have an inconvenience because our GPS isn't going to work, and our compasses will be pointing in the wrong direction, things like that. There's really going to be a shifting that's going to cause massive upheaval. So that was what he had seen as well.
Well, I see a lot of things changing our brains and a lot of things changing our bodies with the sun rays, and the shield's down, and then the sun's getting us directly, which is super important. We need the sun for the upgrades. We need vitamin D, because that's going to help us. Well, that's just really good absorption for a lot of other things. And the diet that they give us doesn't really help us absorb the things that we need for our bodies to make the changes that they need to make. It's all kind of a convoluted thing that's going on, and I just think the more we can at least stand in awareness, the better off we're going to be as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. And use your insight, use your intuition, listen to that little voice, go within, pray, meditate, and look for direction. I saw when I was a teenager, I saw kind of from this angle what I took to be my spirit guides on my dad's side. And my dad was Mexican and Native American with a little bit of Irish in there. And so on his side, because they were definitely Native Americans, I saw what I took to be 5 of my ancestors standing. And I could see the 4 corners. And they were standing more like over in here, on the New Mexico side of the 4 corners. So I always took it to be that that's where I'm supposed to go. And, you got to go with your intuition, as well as, perhaps having backup plans. Another potential safe zone would be over in the Ozarks. And again, we looked and we saw there was a couple nuclear reactors to be mindful of. We know that the Mississippi is going to get larger. There's no way around that. And we got the New Madrid zone. So you're going to feel it when the New Madrid goes off. Another thing to keep in mind is the eclipses, because I really feel that is a signal as to the destiny of the country in so many ways, and also kind of like where to be aware of with the eclipses. And let me pull those up real quick, because I really want to cover a lot of things for you guys that might not have seen all this before put together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff to take in consideration. And if we can consolidate it into an hour for people, that's what we're going to do. So, yeah, the internet can be really, really, really useful. It can be a big brother, but we can also use it to our advantage too.
So these are the two eclipses. The one we had already, August 21st, 2017. And, at that time I was in Florida and did watch it. And then the other one's going to be April 8th, 2024. So they're not quite 7 years apart. But when you get to the midway point, which is going to be, this December, it just makes me feel, again, this December is critical. And I do think that there's meaning here. For one, where's this? This is Cascadia. And this eclipse started here and finished down where? In Charleston. So if we go back to our hazard zone, there's a hazard, and this is all a hazard. And this is where the eclipse went through. Here, and it does go through here, the New Madrid, and ends here. Is that just a coincidence that happens to go through, some of the biggest earthquake hazard zones? I think it's really curious. It's really, really curious. And then we have the other one, which is going to go this way. Now, the St. Lawrence, too, is a fault zone through here. And Casey did see this getting much wider, too. And then it comes through, boom, right here where X marks the spot, this little box right in here, it's the New Madrid. And then it goes down through Texas and through Mexico, and we do see big, big quakes down in this area as well on a regular basis. We just saw that was a 7.4, down in this area right here. So again, to me, this looks like maybe you want to call it programming in the matrix. You want to say this is the will of God. Take your choice, but I think it does have meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is essentially all one big program. As the problem is they've gotten rid of a lot of the programming manuals that we use to predict these things and understand these things as far as what's going to happen to us in the future. So, I mean, the little bit of info we do have to go on is an absolute blessing. So I'm super happy we have some stuff. And then from that, we use our instincts and our intuition, and we just do the absolute best we know how.
And I'm going to end up, I think tomorrow I'll put this up on the Evolutionary as well, because I think this one's an important one, and I recognize not everybody is subbed to EEARTS, so I'll probably upload this tomorrow for Evolutionary as well, so everybody can see as much of this and get a feel for what's coming. There's one other component too that I really look at with care, and we've talked about this site before, and I'm not going to go into big detail on this channel, but just be aware that they do forecasts. And, this particular website, which uses things like, its resources and sources are, such agencies as the CIA, for instance, and the FBI, as well as other military sources. It shows in its forecasts that the U.S. population loses 230 million people come 2025. So something happens between 2017, coincidentally, when the first piece of that double eclipse happened, and 2025, something occurs in which 230 million Americans are no longer in America. So, it's up to each to do with that info whatever they want. There's other countries as well. They all happen to be NATO countries and U.S. allies that lose major amounts of their population. So it does feel like there's an awful lot going on right now. and a lot to consider when you're trying to pick that quote unquote safe zone.
There's a lot, so I mean, hopefully we did narrow it down just a tiny bit. I mean, everybody needs to do their own research as far as where they're at, and maybe this will give you some guidelines as far as where to start, I hope.
Yes, I hope you guys, found this interesting. I hope it, got some people thinking or planning. So again, when you look at these areas, there are some areas that always kind of show up in the maps as being relatively good. Another area would be Western Texas, for the most part. It seems okay. As far as what we have seen with the big earth changes, some areas in Ohio might be okay. Again, the Appalachians as a whole are thought to be a better place to be. And if you could tolerate the cold weather, you will see expansion through the St. Lawrence. There's going to be flooding up through here. There will be some earthquake activity, but maybe perhaps, northern New York, northeastern New York State up through Vermont, Massachusetts, northern Maine, Canada as well. If you could tolerate the cold and make it, those could be decent areas as well to look at, as well as perhaps, into North Dakota, some of Montana. Again, the issue is if Yellowstone goes off, that changes all that. As well as we probably will see some of the other ones going off too. Maybe Mount Hood, maybe Rainier, up in the Cascadian area.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say a huge thank you to Miss Granny Anonymous. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate all of you guys in there. And thank you for everything that you do and keeping the room like really high vibe and a safe place to be so people can share and have a nice experience here. Thank you.
So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your support also over on Patreon and on Ko-Fi as well. You guys keep us afloat. If anybody needs any energy work, just reach out to us, evolutionaryenergyarts at protonmail.com or also at gmail.com. And we would definitely love to help you with that as well. Please do prepare. I do feel that we might have a few months before November election selection or nothing happens. I do feel that we're going to go into a little bit more of a tougher time in November and December. So I think we need to prep for that. And of course, there's stuff happening every day now. Yes. Every day we got different stuff to work on. We love you guys. Stay safe. God bless and namaste.
God bless and namaste.